right, pardon me. I guess we will go ahead and get things started. We will do roll call first. Anderson? Here. Pine and Lynch?
Here.
Frazier?
Here.
Gade? Grimm?
Here.
Harrelson? Murray?
Here.
Shetty?
Here.
Silman? Smith?
Here.
And Sturdivant is present. Staff members, would you like to?
Sarah Gardner present.
Daniel Bissell.
Megan Hill.
All right, next we have approval of the minutes from the August 5th meeting, which were included in today's packet. Any corrections? Anybody notice? A motion to approve minutes for August 5th?
Frazier, I approve.
Any second?
I can second. Smith.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Passes. All right. Over to you.
All right. As we don't have members of the public to comment on items not on the agenda, we'll skip to announcements. Beginning with action items from the last meeting, we had one action item, and that was for staff to provide a link to the recording of the update provided by Transportation Services Director Darian Nagelgam to the City Council on progress made on the Fare Free Transit Program. Hopefully you did all receive that link when we sent it out, and we also included a copy of the slides in today's agenda packet in case anybody would like to go over some questions near the end of the meeting. And then in terms of upcoming events, this will need corrected afterward. I pointed out that our Coco Roz training on Monday is not tentative. It is in fact going forward. You can see we have a list of the Climate Fest events, which we went over last month. Thank you to those of you who signed up to host some of the events. A couple other corrections. The Community Sing event runs from 6 to 6:30, not 5:30 to 6:30. Apologies for that. And EVs at the Market starts at 7:30, though, of course, any of you who want to be there at the crack of dawn to say hello at 7 are welcome to. Do we have any questions on Climate Fest events? Good. All right. We do know we have a mailer that should be hitting everyone's mailboxes later this week. Megan brought a copy, and there are copies available for free at the front desk if anyone would like one. Otherwise, you can wait for that to land in your mailboxes. Thank you. And then, does anybody have any community events to share?
This is Shetty, and I wanted to let everyone know that there's an event coming up this Sunday at the Englert Theater at 2 p.m. It's the Prompt for the Planet. The Office of Sustainability and the Environment is partnering with a local nonprofit called the Lena Project, and we are having an art showcase that's based on a student's project working with Poet Laureate Amanda Gorman, who created a prompt for the planet, which was basically asking everyone to give voice to the environment through art. So there's music and dance and singing and spoken word and all kinds of things happening. So that's at 2 p.m. on Sunday at the Englert. Please join.
Can't you also make a promise?
Yes, it's part of our Promise to the Planet initiative also, which is basically our office is trying to take the catalyst of art and move that to action also. So we're asking people to make a promise to the planet, which is just a climate action that they can take, and we're collecting data on that. We have a map of Iowa City that we're going to try to turn completely green by Earth Day 2025. So the city has been a helpful sponsor with that, and also Mid-American Energy Foundation has been a sponsor for the event, so thank you very much for that.
Yes, if anybody does make a promise, you can get your button at the front desk in our lobby here in City Hall. Any other events? All right, well, then moving on, it's a great pleasure to welcome Tam Marcus and Rachel Rockwell, who are here today to provide an update on the Resilience Hub project. I'll bring up the slides and let them take it away from there.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Hey,
Hello.
good afternoon.
Hi, Miss Rachel. How you doing?
I'm fine, thank you.
I would have never believed that you were sick. Well,
Makeup is an amazing thing.
thank you for making it work today, Rachel, and thank you all for the time today to talk a little bit about the Resilience Hub pilot program with the neighborhood centers of Johnson County. I'm Tamara Marcus. Tamara rhymes with Sarah, but Tam is great. I use any and all pronouns, and I'm one of the owners of Empowered Solutions Collective, which is a local-based sustainability consulting business. And so we've had the pleasure to be able to work with neighborhood centers of Johnson County and the city of Iowa City to help develop this Resilience Hub plan, which we will share a little bit about today. And I have control over the slides, or you?
I do.
Okay, next slide, please. So I've gotten to introduce myself. I want to give Rachel Rockwell a chance to introduce herself as well. Rachel?
Thank you. Yes, I'm Rachel Rockwell, and I'm Executive Director for Neighborhood Centers of Johnson County. I've been with the organization for about 2 years. Very excited about the Resilience Hub initiative and thinking about what that can mean to the neighborhoods that we serve. I met Tam before in Lane County in 2020, and so it's just been wonderful to work with her again and be planning for how to address community needs together along with Sarah. And thank you for listening to us today.
Thanks, Rachel. And so today, like I mentioned, we'll chat a little bit about the NCJC Resilience Hub project, starting with a little bit of foundation about what Resilience Hubs are for those who might not be as aware, followed by some conversation about next steps and some final thoughts. So with that, what is a Resilience Hub? Next slide, please. So essentially, Resilience Hubs are community-centered locations that provide varying types of support based off of neighborhood needs. And so they're really individualized locations, again, based off of the needs of the community and the organization that's hosting that site. Next slide, please. Some of those needs can be are tied to supporting residents generally, a lot of coordination of communication and information. Distribution of resources can also be a function of these hubs. And then also, these hubs tend to have strong sustainability principles to reduce carbon pollution as well, in addition to enhancing quality of life. So it's both this combination of the physical infrastructure as well as the social infrastructure to help build that social resiliency component too. Next slide, please. So there are, in the Urban Sustainability Directors Network framework of Resilience Hubs, there are 3 functions. You can see those here on the screen. So there's this everyday function, disruption, and recovery. So everyday, thinking again about what is needed in the day-to-day for the community members and residents using this site. Again, a lot of those functions tie to messaging and information. And then these hubs seek to identify a trusted site as well as staff and other resources within that community. So the site that's already known as being a point of resources, a point of support within that neighborhood. Oh, sorry, there's 2 other phases. You're doing a great job. So the other phase, one of the other phases is the disruption phase. So, okay, we're going along in the day-to-day. Now we've had this disruption event. That might look like a natural disaster event, such as a derecho. It could look like a health event, health crisis, such as a global pandemic. It can even look like a disruption event in an individual's life or a household's life, right? So not just a shared natural disaster event. And so these hubs aim to provide support, again, to withstand that disruptive event. And then the last phase is that recovery phase. So after we've experienced that disruptive event, we've been able to hopefully address that the immediate needs of that event. How do we support the users of these hubs in that recovery phase following that disruption? Next slide, please. And again, so there's 5 foundational areas that you can see on the screen. Again, this is coming from the Urban Sustainability Directors Network, which is the framework that we used for this planning process. Some of those foundational areas are shown here. So services and programs, communication, building and landscape, power and operations. So again, emphasizing that it's not just the physical infrastructure piece of this, but also building that community resilience component too, through those programs and operation components as well. So that's a bit of foundation of of Resilience Hubs. So now I'm going to turn it over to Rachel to talk about the NCJC planning process.
Thank you. So I'm not, am I echoing for you guys?
Nope, you sound
Okay, I
great.
think I see. Okay, great. So I don't know if you all know, but neighborhood centers have been around for over 50 years. And so we are currently in 2 neighborhoods, the Pheasant Ridge neighborhood in the midst of a low income housing units, mini units, where over, I think, 700 families live. And now it has been established as the wonderful West Side Neighborhood Association, which is the Pheasant Ridge and West Wind neighborhoods. And we also have a center on the south side of town in the Broadway neighborhood. Again, in the midst of some low-income housing units, many low-income housing units, and many businesses and schools. And so our mission as an organization is really to serve families who are in need of connections to community supports and resources that and many of our families are members of the immigrant and refugee populations. And so also our team members are from the neighborhoods that we serve and have common life experiences and languages of the individuals that we serve. I don't know if you want to go to the next slide, Sarah, that might help guide my conversation. Okay, thank you. So we have been meeting with a team of folks, but guided by Tam in our efforts in thinking about the existing demographics in the neighborhoods that we serve, and how do we build upon the early childhood education, after-school programs, and family support programs that exist within our organization. We want to look at how are we responding when there's a need outside of the day-to-day supports that we offer as part of our programs and services. And the team that you see in front of you have all been engaged in thinking about what that looks like. And so I have been leading and handpicking folks from the organization that I think have specific insights to how we could do this in a way that has the best possible impact on the community. And the individuals who've been helping us with the organization include Bea Arredondo. She is our volunteer and community engagement coordinator. She is very connected with the Latinx community and has grown our volunteer engagement programs from like a little over 100 plus individuals in a year to well over 500 now, and is really working to build relationships that will help sustain the organization and also sustain this initiative. Michael Shaw is our Director of Neighborhood Health Equity, and that is a new role with neighborhood centers, which is really focused on making sure that we are delivering on our promise of connecting our communities with vital resources that are needed, and making sure that we're doing that in a way where people feel safe, that we're focusing on health and wellness and mental health, making sure that we're doing that at the neighborhood level. So that means being responsive to the different cultures and languages that are spoken, and the demographics there. And then we have Jonathan Brinson, who's also a fairly new team member. I'll talk a little bit more about our expansion project, but Jonathan has been brought in to be able to think of this from another lens about as we're growing the organization, as we're expanding, how do we integrate different practices or tools or mechanicals into that expansion so that we're better serving the neighborhoods that we're in. You can go to the next slide. Here's a couple pictures of a few of our planning sessions. I think there are 3 or 4 in here. This is at the Pheasant Ridge Neighborhood Center, where we do have an outside gazebo where people often gather, and there's food distribution that happens inside the lobby there and outside of the lobby there. We've had several events right on the property there, like giving away backpacks, getting ready for school, and other kind of community gatherings. The site has some land there that we would like to think about how do we utilize that better for the use of neighborhoods when there is a disruption. Right now, we are open really based on the school district's schedules. And so if there's snow or some kind of weather emergency or shutdown for various reasons, we follow that schedule. And one of the things we've really been thinking about is like, who are we and who can we be when parents still need to be at work or parents still need care for their children and their lives are disrupted, rather than how do we shift or adapt to still have a presence in the neighborhood and support the neighborhood through whatever they're going through. You can go to the next slide. Just another angle. And one more angle. So as we've been planning with TAM, we've really looked at this in the from three different aspects of like the big goals. And we know, first of all, like we need to increase community resilience awareness. And so like, what is the need? When is there going to be a need? How do we connect? I think really this part is really about relationships and understanding what resources exist and having some conversations and linking ourselves together so that we are aware of what even exists as an organization, and then the broader community is aware of us as an organization and how we might be of service in times of disruption or disaster. And then the next goal is to invest in resilience resources. And so we don't necessarily have a budget of what the investment's going to look like right now, but we do have an outline of what our needs are and how we're going to get there. And so that's the best start. And then the last part is making sure that as an organization, we've got about 90 employees at our organization, is really making sure that as an organization, we understand the resources that exist. We are committed to being a support in the time of disaster or disruption in the community, and we know what that would look like. And then preparing training for our staff to be able to respond before, during, and after disruption. Go to the next slide. So we know that the seed money for a resilience hub is probably not going to be everything that we need to sustain, but we're super excited about what this looks like long term for the neighborhoods that we serve. And so we know that there's going to be looking for long-term funding to support this initiative. Also, our second goal is what alternative power sources are we going to need? Because we know, first of all, to be able to communicate, for our families and neighbors to be able to communicate and understand next steps in the midst of disaster or emergency or disruption, we're going to have tools to be able to communicate. So we're working on those. And then the third one is to create public information resources, and to make sure that those are also accessible and culturally relevant and in all the languages where our neighbors and those we serve can use those as tools in the time of need. And you can go to the next slide. So under the recovery function piece, we really know that with the majority of those we serve coming from the immigrant and refugee population, and from experience in trying to share out supplies or resources, even food, that folks have experienced disruption a lot in their lives and how they're responding, or maybe that there's a trauma response when new occurrences happen or occurrences can trigger memories from the past. We want to really be cognizant of the need for mental health supports, and be able to provide those through neighborhood centers. That can be just kind of as triaging during a disruption, but then mostly we see that as a part of the recovery function for this. And through this, we want to make sure we're limited in what we're not mental health providers, but we will need to make sure that we have a complete map of the assets in the community so that when we're referring people out, that we can do warm referrals and make sure that the services and supports that we are pointing folks towards are real, accessible, and if they need support accessing those, that we know how to do that. Okay. Next steps. I think Tam might be taking over part of this, but if you go to the next slide. So using the plan, Iowa City grant. So as I described before, that we know that there's this seed money for us to move forward with this, and the plan is outlined very nicely. I think we have the order of operations in which things need to happen, and probably one of the next steps is like looking at the budget and the resources that we have right now to see how we're investing. Tam's going to talk about Resiliency Climate Corps, but I'll just kind of move the bullets around a little bit and share that Neighborhood Centers is moving into a third neighborhood, which is the Towncrest neighborhood. And we're really excited about this project. We've bought a very old building that will be completely renovated on the outside, on the inside, and the roof is even coming off, and we're raising the roof for our early childhood education center. And inside of this building, it's about a 15,000 square foot building and has a pretty sizable parking lot. The address is 1041 Arthur Street. It's right across the street from Town and Campus housing units, and in a neighborhood that has had a lot of investment over the past few years from the city. And I think the city is really excited about this additional investment in that community. We, Neighborhood Centers, received a funding through the ARPA funds in the amount of $2 million for this project. And we plan on being able to open the doors about this time next year. And we will have 5 additional early childhood education classrooms, child care for 0 to 5-year-olds, after school programs for about 30 kids in that building. And also we have a sizable computer lab and a large community room, which out of all our 3 locations, as far as space for trainings, a space for communities, members or neighbors to gather in the time of a disruption, this one has the most promise. and we're thinking about, as we're renovating this building to our needs, thinking about our energy needs and how we can utilize sustainable energy for the future. So we're very excited about that project. And I know you guys talked about community events a little bit ago. We are doing a kind of sort of a groundbreaking block party on September 21st at 1041 Arthur Street. And so please, if you can, come out and check us out and help us celebrate this expansion into a new location. And Tam, would you like to talk about Resiliency Climate Corps?
I would, and it's actually Climate Resiliency Corps, you guys, so switch those words in your mind. And before I do that, I just wanted to add a couple of points to what Rachel was sharing. So for each of those goals, there's additional objectives and action steps that outline the steps to reach those goals, which I didn't include here just for the sake of time, but just a little bit of context and background for that. And then through this planning process, we've also been able to have multiple meetings with Johnson County EMA and Johnson County Public Health, as well as the City of Iowa City, to be aware of any existing resources, partnerships, et cetera, possible areas of collaboration between NCJC and these organizations as well. And then the Climate Resiliency Corps will actually provide an opportunity for community members to get involved and actually review the plan and develop zines to help communicate different pieces of the plan to neighbors in the community. So next slide, please. Just a few final thoughts, and then I think Rachel and I would like to take some questions. Next slide, please. So really just two big key takeaways. I wanted to keep it simple for this. So resilience hubs can help build community. So hopefully through this process, you can see, all of the different partners, public-private partners, right, that are collaborating on this project to help figure out not only how to develop the plan, but what's realistic for the implementation phase for this organization, right? Because that's going to look different across each organization, which leads me to the second big point. Planning support can help make projects like this possible for organizations that are already doing a lot, right, and doing a lot of good for the community. And so, asking an organization to tackle something extra can be a big lift for them, right, depending on the capacity of that organization. So having support, whether it's myself or someone else, to help provide relevant resources tied to information such as do you want to go solar? Does the generator actually make sense for the space based off of the needs of your organization and the people you're serving, right? Being able to provide some of the information for folks, for leadership to review and make informed decisions helps make these projects possible. So with that, there should be a thank you slide, but thank you, and we're happy to take any questions.
John Fraser. I drive up and down Mormon Trek constantly and wasn't aware that you had that location at Pheasant Ridge. And I'm curious about how you communicate. What are your public relations? What's your marketing story, so you don't underpromise or overpromise what it is you're providing to the neighborhood? And along with that, does that audience welcome you? Do they resent you? Are they asking you, why are you here? How have we been identified as needy? And thank you for recognizing it. Or I resent that you're putting me in that category. What's the communications challenges that you face as you move into these neighborhoods?
I
Rachel?
think you've got a lot of great questions there. So we started in a 3-bedroom apartment, which used to be the Mark IV or Mark V, I don't think Mark IV apartments years and years ago. So Neighborhood Centers is a very grassroots organization who has grown over the last 50 years. And I would say that it is one of the first places that folks, new Iowans, they could be from other states or other countries, are pointed in our direction, and when they come into our centers, they are welcomed. They tell us that they feel welcomed, and we look at, you know, what their needs are and the needs that we can address. Unfortunately, in the last, I would say 15 years or so, the need for childcare and after school programs and the family support programs, which are the main things that we do, is so much greater than our ability to serve. And we have waiting lists for all of those programs. I would say, you know, we are tucked in right in the midst of both of these neighborhoods. And so unless you're looking for us, unless you're living in that neighborhood, you might not ever see the building or drive by. You'd have to go on Roberts Road, which is, you know, kind of just that neighborhood really uses. I would encourage you to come and visit us and see who we are and experience who we are. You kind of got to get into the buildings to relay that. We do monthly, 3 times a month now, newsletters that go out about our activities and our initiatives and programs. And I would be glad to get you all on the newsletter listserv. You can unsubscribe very easily, so don't get mad at me if that happens. We've been working really hard to increase our presence in the community. I came in 2 years ago, and before I applied for the job, I didn't know that neighborhood centers existed. I do live in Linn County, but I knew of other organizations such as UAY and other things like that. And so I think neighborhood centers has been Johnson County's best kept secret for about 50 years. And we have worked really, really hard over the last 2 years to make sure that that's no longer the case. And that's through strategic planning and staff training and that type of thing. We, I will say, out of the 90 employees that we have in both of our centers and in our after school programs, you know, a lot of them, probably 50% of them, live in the neighborhoods we serve and are from the same demographics of those we serve. And so you would have to ask the individuals, but I think that we are a treasure in those neighborhoods, and they would say that.
Thank you.
This is Sturtevant. I follow up, I guess. What determines neighborhood? What determines the scope of your service area, I guess?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that's part of one of the initial kind of questions that an organization will go through. What do we want our scope to be? Is it just, you know, the clients or individuals that we're currently serving? Is it extending beyond that? Especially for an organization like NCJC that has some programs that are outside of their external buildings, right? So then their physical buildings. So then, you know, do you want those services to extend beyond, again, like those buildings to those individuals that those programs are serving? So for this, so I guess to answer your question, generally it's tailored to each Resilience Hub. And for this Resilience Hub, it's NCJC's existing clientele was really the audience that we were thinking about during this planning process. Anything to add to that, Rachel?
I would just say, in general, that's how it works, is we are serving at the neighborhood level. And to define it, I mean, I would say like the elementary school, junior high, high school that's immediately around, if we could draw a circle around that, that's probably a good way to, you know, put an outline around those that we serve. We also, because some of the community awareness or initiatives that we like to do, people do come from other neighborhoods. So we often have like health clinics on Sundays, or partners like Table to Table will come in and do food distribution. And so we don't ever limit. We're not going to say you don't live in this neighborhood, we can't serve you. That's not something we've ever done. But as we're looking at the Resilience Hub, there's a certain amount of capacity that we're going to have just with our space and that type of thing. And when we've come up to wanting to reach more than what the capacity of our buildings or the land adjacent to our buildings are, we have done outreach. So we will go into other neighborhoods and have events and share information and that way. And so that might be something that we have to think about, even with some of the awareness or other supports that we want to offer after a disruption, to doing some outreach work also.
Thank you.
This is Einan Lynch. Since this is a pilot program for the city and the first time we've gone through this kind of process, I'm just curious if you've learned anything during this planning process or any lessons for when we replicate it in another organization.
Ooh, I like that question. So this is the third Resilience Hub that I've worked on. So the first two were in Lynn County. One was a Lynn County facility, like Lynn County owned property, and then one was Wellington Heights Community Church, where we installed a solar system with battery backup power onto that site. So each of those feel really different. So I guess that's kind of the more that you have the ability to provide support to structure the process to the organization, the better, because each of those organizations has their own kind of like struggles or hangups that, it's really hard to just provide like a general model that if you don't have, especially background in like sustainability or resilience, it could feel really overwhelming. And so I just think about, obviously establishing the site through a government entity, right, that process looks a little bit different than like a nonprofit that owns their building. So it was through each of those like many conversations of each of those partners that I think we actually were able to actualize the the end result and establish that Resilience Hub. And I think NCJC, the planning process, has only reaffirmed that. Yeah. Anything? What did you learn, Rachel?
I would just add on, I think one of the things that have been most valuable is the building community connections with those who, otherwise we just would keep going in our own departments, our own organizations, doing the best we can for the community, but without like having a face, being in the same space, talking about our desires in our particular roles or with our organizations, the resources that we have, the challenges that we have, like that relationship building is, I think, going to take, well, first of all, it adds resilience for us already that are in the room. Because we have a face and we know another person we could call in a certain scenario, or like someone to reach out to if we need to reach a certain population or have a conversation about how to respond in a certain way. Mm-hmm. So that just automatically, the planning process has built a little bit of a Resilience Hub already without us implementing the rest of the plan. So those spending that time in the planning process and building those relationships and connections, I think you cannot undervalue that. You can't overvalue it. I don't know what the word is, but it's important.
No, I'm glad that you said that, because it reminds me of, like that first planning session with everyone, like in person. We had scones and Sarah made these lovely muffins. And just like, like when you when you create, it's like placemaking, space making, right? When you create like that kind of energy, it helps, I think, the conversation become more honest and then more possible, right? It's not just like this sterile, like, okay, let's do solar and let's do, you know, in that session, I feel like it was really, you know, I intentionally don't provide a list of things because then people just do that, right? They point to the things that sound like what they've heard and sound like what they make sense for this, as opposed to thinking about what their organization really needs. And so, yeah, I feel like in that planning session, that first day, just like the conversations that were happening there, I am not often hearing in like in groups, you know what I mean, of those kinds of people, right? It was very honest and open and like, yeah, just personal. And I think, again, so that was the only time that we were all in person in the same space. So a lot of this planning process needed to be flexible to all of these individual schedules. You know, sometimes that met in person, sometimes that was phone conversation, sometimes it wasn't. Everyone could make that time, right, because schedules are really tricky. So yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up, Rachel, because those opportunities to like be in community with one another for something like this, I think, are a really important part of this process, or for this particular report.
This is Graham. I have kind of one question. The communities you're talking about, there's a lot of language barriers in there. What kind of steps do you guys take to make sure that this information's making it past those barriers in an understandable way?
Yeah, it's a great question. Do you want to talk about the language line, Rachel?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things, so we have, I think, 12 different languages spoken within our organization and American Sign Language. And so we hire in a way that supports families with common languages and cultures. So that was already established with neighborhood centers. But however, the folks that are hired, they have particular roles and particular jobs and aren't just available, at any time or like for overtime in case of disruptions or disaster and that type of thing. And they're not at the front desk where when someone is in need, they're going to be their first point of contact. And so one of the things that we had already been discussing and just fit really well in with this is to have an interpretation service, so that if there's an immediate need and there's an immediate need to communicate with someone in another language other than the two folks or the 10 folks in the room and the one person who's there, we have invested in a service who will interpret real time. I think there's like dozens and dozens of languages that they can support us with. And so it's a service that we now have that we haven't ever had before. And so we're in the process we've rolled that out with our staff, and we're in the process of trying to encourage them out of their regular routines to use it before there is crisis or disruption, just to better the communication and make sure we're really understanding everything instead of kind of muddling through, so that when the time comes, we're able to make sure that we're getting clear messages out to folks and clear direction in a time of, when there's a lot of energy and concern about what's next. So that's one step we've already taken, and we're pretty proud of it.
So to follow up on that question, does that extend to like written documentation as well then, as far as translated documents?
So there's other ways. No, that is specifically for real-time conversations, or like if we were on a meeting like this, then we could call in to the service and they will interpret real time so that we can communicate that way. We already access the University of Iowa's translation services, and we have internal teams who do translation also. or team members who do that, especially for Arabic and French and Spanish. But that is something that I think we would have to partner with the city and the county with when it comes to the specific stuff around emergencies or disaster response.
Which I think this is maybe kind of connected, but can you talk a little bit, Rachel, about the event that's going to be hosted at, the preparedness event that's going to be hosted at NCJC with Johnson County EMA, and kind of how the Welcoming Week event, does that?
Yeah, so that event was going to happen in Welcoming Week, which was a couple weeks away. And when we met, the conversation was that no one was prepared to do that on the week of the 20th. And so we're looking at, I believe in partnership with United Way and Johnson County EMA, they are working on some kits and some materials, resources, information that are translated into several languages that we can disperse at our various centers. I believe the plan is they might be at our event on the 21st to kind of roll out an introduction to some of those things, and then later on in the fall, or to have a larger event in the Pheasant Ridge neighborhood to just amp up some awareness of the resources that are in the communities with some specific languages that are in that neighborhood. So, and then to give out some kits. One of the things that we've been talking about in our meetings is, do we do this as an event? Because again, culturally, especially in the Pheasant Ridge neighborhood, we found if there's large events where we're inviting the whole neighborhood and there's giveaways, that it is sometimes not the best venue to do that for lots of different reasons, and that we're thinking about maybe we put the kits and the resource information into like welcome bags, that when we have new registrations or new visitors to our neighborhood centers, that they're going out that way also. So I don't think the planning is 100% with that, but I know that United Way is working towards finding resources and financial funding, or hosting events that can get that information out. And so that, I think we should wrap this all together. That was my suggestion too. And I talked about our work around resilience hubs.
Thank you.
I'll just add as a note to that, this is Gardner speaking, that actually it was one of the happiest emails I think I've received this year when the United Way sent an email asking, have you heard about resilience hubs? We're going to be raising funds to help with this effort at NCJC. And that's how I knew that the effort was really taking root, and like lots of other community resources were being marshaled to help with the effort. So it's wonderful.
Well, thank you all for the time today. Sarah has my contact information if you all need me after. And yeah, thank you for letting me be here. Thanks, Rachel, for making it work.
Yeah. Thanks,
No
Tam.
problem.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay. So we have several other programs that we're giving you updates. Today, we're really focusing on what we think of as our tentpole initiatives from the last several years. So we've got the Resilience Hubs as one major effort. The other two you're a little more familiar with. We wanted to bring you up to speed on the insulation grant program, in part because we received a request from the State Energy Office to provide them with a memo outlining the program as a possible model to incorporate into the rebate program that they're hoping to roll out next year. And then it seemed like a good time, with one Root for Trees program year ending and another starting up, to give you an update on that as we have in the past. So we're going to kick it off with the insulation grants, and Danny's going to take us through that.
So you saw in your packet a memo on the insulation grant program, and it's more than just an update. It's kind of a history of the entire program. Like Sarah mentioned, because the State Energy Office is working on putting together their rebates under the Inflation Reduction Act, but also many of you were not on the commission when this program started, so we thought it would be good to have a full history. So the installation grant program actually started as a residential energy efficiency program with a whole menu of items. And we did find that energy efficiency means different things to different people, and their eyes tended to glaze over when they heard the term. And so that program wasn't that successful. So the decision was made to focus solely on insulation and electric panel upgrades. The panel upgrades were meant to allow households to pursue further improvements down the road, including heat pump water heaters, heat pump HVAC systems, solar installations, EV charging. So we made sure to communicate those to the homeowners, but we would only provide the upgrade to a 200 amp electric panel. In addition to insulation, bringing the attic insulation up to R60. And I know the numbers aren't in there on the panels, but we did provide 29 electric panel upgrades as part of that program. Moving forward, especially as the discussion around the Inflation Reduction Act was coming to be, we decided to focus solely on attic insulation, not only for cost savings, because insulation projects proved to be significantly cheaper than electric panel upgrades, but also we were not sure how many households were following through on further upgrades once they got that upgraded panel. So updated with the 10 projects we've been able to move forward with this year, we've been able to in total upgrade the insulation of 125 households, which, as you know, helps address the comfort of the home during extreme heat and cold, and reduces their energy use, regardless of what HVAC technology they are currently have, but it also allows them to right-size any further upgrades, including solar or a heat pump, so that those costs will be lower as well. And going forward, we are, as those rebates become available, administered by the State Energy Office, we are aware that they are under the Inflation Reduction Act, only considering rebates of up to $1,600 for insulation improvements. So we might, as those rebates become more clear, the direction they will go, we might come to you for more guidance on how the insulation grant program will pair with that, whether we will make up the difference because the IRA rebates look like they'll only cover about half of such a project, or if we will look to perhaps cover 100% of some projects based on income, half based on more moderate income. Like it says in the memo, we'll continue to monitor the progress on those rebates and anticipate coming to the commission in early 2025 to discuss further. Are there any questions about the insulation grant program?
Did they give you like a timeline for how long it's going to take them to figure it out?
Yes.
I think that's best described as a ever-moving target. but supposedly, as of the last update, they hope to file their application to administer those funds by the end of this year. Then there's a public comment period, then it gets approved, and then there is, the first part will be a contractor rollout where they will be training contractors to perform the services and also to interact with the portal that they'll need to use to apply for these rebates on their behalf. So realistically, we're not anticipating that these rebates will really be available to Iowa City households until probably the second half of next year.
I have a question. This is Anderson speaking. In the memo, it mentions that this was previously funded by an emergency levy. Iowa City no longer has the ability to collect that levy. Can you speak more about what that is?
Sure. I believe it was in 2017 that the City Council declared a climate crisis, which allowed us to implement an emergency levy. I can't remember the valuation of it, but last year or 2 years ago, the state took away our ability to have that levy. So going forward, this grant will be funded through the general fund.
And I think it's worth noting from the grant that our use of general fund dollars makes this possible to have a simple, streamlined program, which has been part of its success. If we start using federal dollars, for example, there are a host of reporting requirements that get attached onto that that are going to, and this is in no way meant to be a criticism of those federal reporting requirements, just as a way of recognizing that with federal dollars comes more paperwork and more accountability, often for very good reasons, but the end effect of that is that it's harder for these households to participate in. So continuing to use local dollars is one of the ways we're able to do a very quick turnaround on these projects. That being said, I think it's going to be something that we are all going to have to be thinking about together. In addition to the elimination of the emergency levy, we already know from preliminary budget reports that we are going to be heading into perhaps a 3-year period of very tight operating funds for the city. And so thinking about how best to maintain this program, does it live on as a wraparound around those rebates to extend the life of the program? Is it something where we start offering a tiered funding structure, where we start asking households at certain income levels to contribute a little toward the project in order to participate? Or do we cap it even, the number of households that participate each year? Those are understandably tough decisions and things that we will be coming to the commission to help us make a recommendation to council as to how it should proceed. So nothing you have to decide today, but certainly something I think we can all benefit from starting to think about now ahead of the next budget season.
Daniel, I thought that was a very fine program and well implemented. And my long-term goals, not that I'm important, but I would hope that we don't have a lot of programs that are one and done and now let's try something else. I would hope that we'd see enough momentum started with a program like this, because we're not done insulating Iowa City. And so my hope is that we could build on these programs so that they become broader, deeper, more involved, more communications, more energy, so that ultimately, because insulation is important and heat pumps are important, that we can really make an impact number-wise by continuing it and not just say, well, that was fun, that was great, now let's move on and try something else. I'd rather put more blood, sweat, and tears into something that's already good and keep building on it, but I'm not smart enough to tell you how to do it. I don't have a clue.
I think one of the strengths of this program is that it's almost taken on a life of its own at the grassroots level. Neighbors talking to neighbors, contractors talking to their clients about it. And that was really a early success of the program, contractors doing their own outreach and marketing it to their clients.
So we're not done.
Exactly, I hope not.
Cool.
And in fact, our area contractors, I think, will be in a good position to participate in the rebate program whenever the state does roll it out, because we've got those strong channels of communication, and we'll be able to help them get enrolled in the training and work through the rebate questions. So hopefully this program, as you said, continues, but also serves as a good launching pad for future efforts. If there are no further questions, we can move on to Root for Trees, which Megan is going to take us through.
All right, so in your memo, just a little bit of background. Root for Trees started in Parks and Rec. It was created right before the 2020 derecho. Good timing, unfortunately, for that program, and it was implemented. It stayed at Parks and Rec for about 2 years and then came to Climate Action. So that program has stayed pretty much the same. One of the noted differences is we did open up a little earlier this fiscal year. So it opened August 1st instead of in September. That was really to give people more time to plant those trees before it started getting really cold. And then also because, personally, because of Climate Fest. I didn't want the program opening right before Climate Fest. And just like Danny said, the funding was out of the emergency levy. It transferred to the Climate Action, exact same reasons. We did hit 1,000 tree vouchers redeemed early on the program, fiscal year 24. So we anticipate hitting 1,500 this cycle. Probably earlier, probably mid-cycle instead of towards the end. And annually, we budget $50,000. We don't ever go over that or hit it. And that is due to, I think, people forgetting to redeem their voucher. And then overall, we have funded $142,000 over that of tree money, city money spent on trees. And as you can see, there are 2 different maps included in the memo. So the first map is all the trees that were redeemed where they're planted for last cycle, so fiscal year 24. The second one is all the trees that have ever been redeemed and planted. So you can see the distribution. And if you have any other questions, I can take them.
This is Smith. I noticed that you had highlighted a couple category areas. Were those category areas where you wanted to have more trees, and then how were you getting residents interested in the program? in
Are you
those
talking
areas?
about on the map?
On the map, there were like 2 gray areas that it seemed like, oh, that's maybe where we don't have as many trees. Like, it looked like it's really equally well distributed across the city, but there were a couple areas that were less.
Yeah,
Maybe?
so correct me if I'm wrong, Danny. Those are the Justice 40 areas.
They're the
So
what?
Justice 40 areas.
Oh.
So it would be nice to increase tree plantings in those areas. And I believe, I did not write it down, there were 19 trees planted last fiscal year in that track. So compared to 314, that's not a lot. It would be nice to increase tree plantings in those areas.
For a little context for those who are unfamiliar with Justice 40, that's a federal initiative that's been tied to a lot of IRA dollars, among other initiatives. The idea being that 40% of the benefits of climate investments should flow to those areas containing community members who historically may have been disadvantaged or had difficulty accessing those benefits or resources. We are not required to track them on a local level, but we do for our own reporting purposes and also as a way to keep our eye out for future grant opportunities, so that something like this, as an example, if we see that there's under-enrollment in the program in a Justice 40 track, then that's something we can speak to in a future grant application and try to make a more targeted effort using the additional funding. Or our own funding, frankly. As Megan said, it would be great to see more trees planted there.
Yeah, and is it just a funding issue, or is it all of the maintaining and upkeep and watering and, I don't know. What are all the variables that like impact why certain, why it might be harder in certain areas?
Well, if you look at the two categories on the map, the one in the center of the city, that's a high-density housing area with a lot of apartments. And so in some ways, those decisions are out of the hands of the residents. Tree planting, historically, there was a very famous study that came out a few years ago out of Detroit. It's one of those things where you really want to be sure that you're doing it as individual households care to participate, right? So I think there are these barriers that you've identified, including, not wanting to maintain them or feeling like maintenance would be a burden. Certainly, we've heard from some residents in the city after the derecho who are reluctant to plant another tree for fear of it falling on their house, or for fear of having to maintain it in various ways, or fear is not even the right word, right? Everybody has the right to do what they want to do in their own yard, and if they don't want to rake leaves or pick up fruit, that's up to them. But one of the things we've tried really hard with this program to steer clear of, and this goes back to the reference to the study out of Detroit, was there have been historically programs where cities have gone in and tried to be a little more aggressive, I would say, in the rollout of the tree plantings. And residents, particularly in more vulnerable households, have pushed back against it, saying, why are you giving me this tree I don't want? I would rather have that money in some other project, or I'd rather, this be used in some other way. And so with Root for Trees, I think we're always trying to thread that needle between making it very clear that we want as many people who want a tree in their yard to have one. We want it to be as easy as possible. We want to lower as many barriers as we can, and at the same time recognizing, like, it is truly up to you what you want to do with your own property. And I will say, I don't think Megan went into this in too much detail, but one of the things we have done with this program is make a conscious effort, especially in the case of renters, to be able to meet them partway. If they are in a single-family residence and want to put a tree in, we have built in a method where landlords can sign off on it, so that just being a renter itself does not have to be a barrier to participating. But thank you for the very thoughtful question. That's the first sentence I should have said. Well, here too, I'll just note that there are some important considerations that we'll be asking you to think through as we look. And if you haven't had a chance to read through the memos yet, we really encourage you to read at least the future considerations section in both. One of them is that as the program is now in its 5th year, over the previous 4 years that we've been running it, we do have residents calling us periodically asking for help with tree removal. We did initially look at providing some funding to help with ash tree removal, and quickly figured out we could have served like 6 or 7 households and expended all the funds in the program. So even having a small carve out for tree removal, we would have served 1 or 2 households in addition to the vouchers. So one of the things that we are thinking about is, one, is there other funding we should be pursuing to help with tree removal, which can be quite expensive? There is a program run through our neighborhood development services for income qualified households that will help with that, though those funds do get expended throughout the year. The other consideration we've also heard back from residents who've planted a tree, and I say this as someone who spent my breakfast watching two fawns eat my hostas, that we have a rising or deer population in town. We have heard from people participating in this program that they have lost their saplings to deer. We've heard from others who've lost them to drought conditions or just, for whatever reason, the tree has failed to thrive. What we have allowed, we don't have a cap on households participating. So although we do have an annual cap. It's one voucher per household per year. But when we hear from a resident that a tree has been, has not thrived and they need another, we encourage them to apply in subsequent years. What the appetite of households are to apply year after year after year to keep putting in a tree to get eaten down by deer is, we don't know yet. But there are some things that we have started to think a little about, including, maybe you've noticed in front of City Hall, trees that get planted in the public right-of-ways are given tree diapers and tree collars to help guard them. Should we be providing additional funding for that in the future rather than telling people to come back for a new tree each year? What's the most cost-effective approach? What's the least frustrating? I think those are all important considerations. And here too, just like with the insulation grant program, something we'd like you all to be thinking about a little early so that as we think ahead to the future of the program and come to you with these questions, you will be able to weigh in on it.
This is Sturtevant. I have a question regarding that. When when they go to get the vouchers, has like any of the community or the retailers doing the trees, have they suggested, hey, you might need this, that, or the other thing? Is any communication like coming from vendors regarding it, like saying, hey?
As far as I know, they just take the voucher, write down the tree species, and that's it. But I'm sure if I was in retail, so I'm sure if the customer has questions, they're more than happy to help and answer them. But I don't know that they provide that like without prompt. I'm not sure.
That could help and just kind of rolling it out to the vendors saying, hey, just mention if you have a lot of deer.
Yeah.
Now is probably a good time too to give props to our nurseries, which have continued to just be great partners on this program. In fact, as you may recall, one of the alterations we made, early on we used to provide a list of preferred trees that were eligible, and then we switched to doing just 2 that were prohibitive because that was easier to administer on both ends. One of our nurseries this year accidentally sold 2 maple trees, and they didn't charge us for it because they recognized and said, we know these are prohibited. This was just a fluke that happened at the point of sale. We are not going to charge you for those. We will fully cover the discounted cost, which I think was just such an incredible show of good faith. We were really thankful for it. And goes to show the strength of the communication that's been developed, that they are very aware of those program requirements. So that was wonderful.
I'll also say the residents who have emailed me back, because I would get quite a few, like, hey, we got our tree, I even got some pictures, which is really nice. They've been really happy, and they said that the garden centers have been helpful.
Put some of the money towards developing deer-resistant saplings.
Well, if there are no further questions, we can move on to the Fare Free Transit update. Hopefully you all heard the presentation, or if not, have plans to listen to it. We're very pleased with the outcomes in the first year of that pilot program. We don't want to spend too much time talking about it since Darian gave such a thoroughgoing presentation to council. But if anybody had any questions that they wanted us to relay or look into, certainly we want to gather those up. And it's probably also a good time to note that we've been pulling points from Darian's presentation for the trivia that's going to happen at Big Grove. So if there were to be a Climate Action Commission trivia team, this might be a way of showing your credentials at that event.
I have a question, and maybe I read the presentation, but I didn't hear all of the presentation, so I'm not sure if this was answered. But I know she was talking about if we're not going to keep having fare free, we need heads up right now because we need new fare boxes. Was there indication from the council like, yep, go ahead and get those new fare boxes, or if we're looking to continue funding this?
No, support from council seemed to be very warm and very enthusiastic about the program. And their directive was to keep on keeping on. So I think they're going to really try to find continued funding past the first 2 years. And now really, because we won't be ordering those fare boxes, we know it'll be at least 2 years plus. So we'll see.
I guess I have another question about do we have a sense of where that funding might be coming from? I know that, like, we raised parking fees to help pay for that, but then I believe maybe we're rolling that back?
That's what the last council meeting.
Yes and no. We did raise the fees. Council initially raised the fees over the amount recommended by staff and have since drawn it back slightly. Staff had recommended going to $2 an hour at some of the core downtown parking ramps. City Council voted to move it up to $3 an hour. Some downtown businesses took umbrage with that. City Council decided at this meeting to roll it back to $2.25, which is still above what staff had initially recommended. And with an eye, they said, toward revisiting this topic in less than 10 years, since it's been more than 10 years since we last raised it. So the idea is to continue raising it, but to do it a little more incrementally. They also voted to approve a night and weekend pass, which we've not had in the past. And that would be a discounted pass for downtown workers who are, particular service workers, who were disproportionately bearing the burden of those increased fees just to get to and from work in the evenings when, they can't avail themselves of free transit service. So the Transit Services Department developed that pass, and it sounds like that'll be rolling forward as well. So some of the funding is going to come from the increase in parking fees downtown. And then I believe council is also looking at tapping into some of our franchise fees, which are fees paid to us by utilities for access to the right-of-ways in Iowa City. And so, heads up, WIM. I think that's one of the funding streams that we're looking at to use for this.
Just a follow-up on that, I'm curious if there's an opportunity during Climate Fest and the fare-free event to talk about, to connect the dots for people between the increased parking rates and that it's going to fund buses, because I'm also curious, like, was there pushback and people not? I've heard of some people who were quite upset about it and then found out why the increases were happening, like, oh, well, now I'm not mad about that. Mm-hmm. So I just wonder if there's opportunity there to really put that out during the fare-free event, especially.
Yeah, there might be. We can look into that. That's a good idea. Any other questions? You all are a quiet bunch today. You just must be awed by Tam and Rachel's presentation. So the only thing that remains then is to confirm the next meeting time and location. We're going to be meeting on October 7th from 3:30 to 5 in the same location. Zach Harrelson, who's not here today, requested an update on the Krandick line, the Cedar Rapids and Iowa City line. He had been reading in the paper some information about a pop-up metro idea that was being explored by the city. He knew also that bus rapid transit was being investigated for that line. And so we reached out to Kent Ralston, who is the director of our transportation planning activity, and he said he'd be very happy to come in October. The bus rapid transit study will be completed by then, so he'll be able to give us an update on that and tell us a little about what we know so far about the Pawtucket Metro initiative. I will say we don't know as much about that as we do about bus rapid transit, just because of the way the information's been trickling out. But it should be an interesting discussion. And I wanted to raise it just as a reminder that you as commissioners can request these topics at any time. Zach, when he emailed, was a little tentative about how to do that, whether it's something he should bring up in a meeting or it's something he should bring up in an email, and the answer is yes. However you feel most comfortable requesting these reports, that is your job as commissioners, and we are happy to oblige. So if there are other things you want to be hearing about, don't ever hesitate to speak up in whatever channel of communication serves you best. And then for actionable items, we didn't really have any come up, but I did make a note to myself. Rachel mentioned that NCJC has several newsletters that they put out that you all might be interested in signing up for. I will, just as a charge to myself, send an email out asking anybody who would like to have their email passed on to be signed up for those newsletters to give it to me, and then I will pass those all on in a bundle to Rachel so that we can get you signed up and see all the good and wonderful work they're doing. So, anything else?
All right, well, with that, we will be back on October 7th at 3:30, same place. Motion to adjourn.
This is Graham, I motion to adjourn.
Second.
Einen Lynch, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
See you next time.